What's going on, AP Worlders? Welcome to your first lesson. We're going to talk about some maps. Don't run out. Where are you going?
Maps? I've seen a map before.
They're also important, right? Just because you've seen a map before doesn't mean you have to run away, right? In AP World History, we're going to talk a lot about maps. We're going to break things down by region to help us further explain it and make everything connect.
And also, if that's not enough for you, the open-ended questions on the test don't use words like India and China. They use words like South Asia and East Asia. And if you don't know the difference, you won't pass. So you kind of need to know these. So while you get ready, I'm going to play you a song.
No, he's not. Go print the maps and come back.
All right, so our first map is of the continents, at least according to the AP World Course Guide. As you can see, unlike any other map you've ever seen before, there are 5 of them. Antarctica is out because it doesn't have a permanent human population that you know about. And the Americas have been merged into one. This is all pretty basic stuff. We're not going to spend too much time here, except in the southeast corner of the map. Simpson, take it away.
All right, the region we're going to first talk about is labeled Oceania. All right, it contains Australia, New Zealand, Papua New Guinea, Hawaii, and a whole bunch of really tiny islands scattered through the South Pacific. It's a region that doesn't get much love in most classes, but we are going to be changing that. Anyhow, anytime you see Oceania, just know that it's referring to that area. It is not referring to Indonesia, the Philippines, or Japan. Just because it's an island in the Pacific doesn't make it part of Oceania. And that's it for the first map. Now let's go to the regions map, where we're going to spend the majority of our time.
Welcome to the regions map, the most important one to know for tests both in our class and for the AP exam. To keep things simple, we'll be going from west to east. That's left to right for you AP geography rookies. And you'll notice that on this map, North America is its own distinct place, consisting of what's now Central America and the modern nations of Mexico, the United States, Canada, and Greenland. Though, if you're asked a question about Greenland, good luck. You're probably familiar with the concept of North America, though, so we need to talk about why Mexico and Central America are all stripy. Simpson?
All right, this map refers to regions of Mesoamerica and the Caribbean, as well as South America as Latin America. We'll dive into the reasons why it has that label later on, but for this lesson, you need to know that Latin America is a sort of poorly defined region, which basically means anywhere south of the Rio Grande, where a language descended from Latin is the primary language. As a general rule, you get a question about Latin America. You'll be expected to provide a response about Mexico or Brazil or Cuba or Argentina, etc. And this is the first area where we see some gray areas in our AP regions. Does Haiti qualify as Latin America? By the definition I just said, yes, but it's unlikely that you'll actually get a question about the Haitian Revolution that's also specifically explained and connected to Latin America, which is why it's so important to know where these regions are as much as where they aren't.
Moving across the pond, we arrive in Europe, and European history is kind of a strange bird in our course because it's really easy for teachers to fall into the trap of teaching European history and pretending that it's world history. Several of you already know what I'm talking about. In fact, the old course guide actually used to have a statement in it specifically that the course couldn't contain more than 20% European history. The new guide doesn't have that for some reason, but we're still going to follow it because this is world history, not European history.
All right, moving away from McDowell's soapbox. Europe isn't divided in the official course guide, but it does have one poorly defined division that might come up in a question, namely the division between Eastern and Western Europe. While you officially can't be asked a question about Western and Eastern Europe, it's still a pretty important distinction. So just think of anything east, that's to the right, of Germany as being Eastern Europe, and Germany or westward to be Western Europe. No, the distinction isn't perfect, but it'll work if a question arrives regarding European regions. Meanwhile, back to the south.
Across the Mediterranean Sea from Europe, we have Africa, which is probably my favorite continent to study in this course because it's got a huge population and a lot of its history is really obscure to Western audiences, so there's a lot of cool stuff that people haven't seen before that I get to show you. And you'll note that Africa in our course is divided into 5 separate regions: North, West, Central, East, and South. North Africa is the odd man out of the bunch. It is frequently under the sway of European empires like the Romans. I'm just kidding, the Romans aren't in our course anymore. And the Islamic caliphates. Trade connections, religious ties, and imperial states have actually made North Africa part of other regions for much of its history. In our course, AP World Modern, it's most commonly associated with the Middle East, which we'll get to in a second.
The rest of Africa deals with regions that the average AP World student won't be too familiar with. So take notes here, it'll help you later. West Africa contains some of the first empires that we'll look at in Africa, like Ghana, Mali, and Songhai. In later units, we'll see West Africa be plundered by the transatlantic slave trade and produce some of the great leaders in the push for decolonization. Central Africa contains the historical kingdom of the Congo, and that's with a K here, as well as the tragic story of the Congo Free State. Southern Africa will showcase Great Zimbabwe early in our course, and this tale of Nelson Mandela and the end of apartheid is going to come later on towards the end of the year. And East Africa contains the Swahili trade states, the empires of Aksum and Ethiopia, and its own stories of colonization and decolonization.
There's one more region in Africa to be aware of, even though it doesn't appear on any of our maps, and that is specifically what's called Sub-Saharan Africa. Sub-Saharan Africa refers to any place in Africa south of the Sahara Desert. Now, again, just like with Western and Eastern Europe, you can't officially be asked questions about this, but it's something that you might wind up encountering in our course, and it is something that I can assure you you will encounter in your day-to-day life when discussing the continent of Africa.
To the north and east of Africa, we wind up in what's known as the Middle East, although usually this is also called Southwest Asia, which contains Egypt, Turkey, Iran, and the area or the areas which we typically associate with the Middle East, like Iraq and Israel and Saudi Arabia.
South of Central Asia, we unsurprisingly have South Asia, a region that overwhelmingly throughout our course refers to India. Seriously, whenever you see a question about South Asia, your brain has to go to India regardless of the time period. It's nearly always referring to that specific geographic location. It could be the Delhi Sultanate, the Mughal Empire, the Maratha Confederacy, British India, or the modern nation states of Pakistan, India, and Bangladesh. Regardless, South Asia equals India in your brain. Put it down now, and you'll succeed later.
All right, up from that we have East Asia. Over the course of AP World, we'll be looking at East Asia quite a bit, with the giant of the region being China and the many dynasties which ruled it over the years. But East Asia also contains Korea and Japan.
Region focus becomes really, really important here because it's incredibly common for the exam to ask questions about South Asia or East Asia, which can be very confusing to students. Put simply, if the question's about East Asia and you write the best essay on India that anyone has ever written, you're not going to score well because you wrote about the wrong region. And that's a silly reason to fail, so don't do that. By the way, speaking of regions that the College Board loves to single out,
Southeast Asia is so weird. It includes regions influenced by China and India, and it's a total mashmash of Buddhist and Hindu states influenced by Confucianism and communism and China and America and Islam, and suddenly my head hurts.
I'll take it from here. Simpson is correct. Southeast Asia tends to be a complicated region, but if you see it on a free response question, don't panic, because Southeast Asia will refer to, in general, Vietnam, Cambodia, Thailand, Myanmar/Burma, Indonesia, or the Philippines. And you might not be familiar with those areas yet, but it's our job to make you familiar with those areas.
Yeah, so in short, you need to know the map, but you shouldn't sweat over it.
I agree completely. Watch this video a couple of times and you will be fine. If you have any questions, send us a remind or an email and we'll be happy to help. Make sure you memorize the map. Hope summer treats you well, and we'll see you in a few weeks for our next lesson.
Bye. East, which
The south of the Sahara should be called...
All right, so we're gonna start talking about Oceania.
Cut!
Yeah, right.